that long. The hound of 100 bites. In the pitch-black Shuriman night, few sounds are as terrifying as the howls of the dune hound. Those who hear their piercing call on the arid wind know to keep a hand on their sword hilt and their horse well rested, for the ravenous packs that rove these sands will chase whatever game they can find in their desert. One pack in particular is driven by a hunger that is deeper and more ancient than that of any mere beast. It is the hunger of a creature who spent ages eating nothing at all. For centuries, Naafiri remained in a crypt, her spirit bound to an ancient throwing dagger. Unable to move or speak, the weapon lay inert as her soul pondered the past. Naafiri was powerful, having almost led the Darkin. How easily she could have bested any of them in combat to become their rightful ruler. Yet how easily she'd been tricked by that awful aspect, Maisha, and cursed to embody these inanimate steel blades. Shame and regret consumed her thoughts. If she could get another chance, if she could only find another host, a new vessel, all she needed was a hand to grip her blade, just a touch. At last, the day came when the doors of her tomb burst open. She sensed the sweet relief of a fresh desert wind, her first in ages, and something else, a human presence. He has come, my host, my sweet, unwitting vessel, thought the darkened soul. But the visitor was aware of her magic. He carefully picked up her dagger with metal tongs and placed it onto a thick, lead-lined cloth. Wrapping the blade tightly, he took great care not to touch it and set off across the desert under the late afternoon sun. Despair overcame Naafiri as she felt the plodding movements of the man's horse across the sands. Was she doomed to this form, this waking nightmare of impotence, for eternity? She felt the steps of the horse quickening as sunset approached, and sensed the distant howls of the dune hounds carried by the wind. This was her opportunity. Without sound or words, the Darkin called out to the beasts, hoping to bring them to this prey, that he might somehow slip. Just a glancing touch of his hand, and the host would be hers. Then she could use him to fulfill the ambitions she had held for so long, and vanquish her regrets. The hounds appeared, salivating with teeth bared. Naafiri's captor clung to the wrapped dagger with one arm, keenly aware of what would happen if it came loose. With his other arm, he drew his sword and attempted to defend himself from the pack. Jaws snapped at the man and his horse from all sides, tearing at them, devouring them piece by piece, until nothing remained. Naafiri felt the world crash into focus as she became overwhelmed by senses. For the first time in ages, she smelled the dry air, which parched her nostrils. The metallic taste of hot blood still coated her mouth. She could see each of the dogs as if from the eyes of a separate packmate. Confusion set in as she felt her sense of self crumble away. throughout the body of each dog. It seemed a cruel irony. She had found not one vessel, but dozens, and none of them were useful in her grand ambitions. She resented the hounds, hated their smell, their fleas, and most of all, their need for companionship. But in time, the Darken's bitterness subsided as she began to grasp the true nature of her hosts. Though feral, their collective thoughts formed a wisdom all its own. Separately, the dogs would starve. Together, they were an apex predator, feasting on whatever game they fancied. There were no individuals. The pack was the entity that dominated all. Naafiri realized this concept was not limited to dune hounds. It applied to fish, ants, and humans. It even applied to Darken. She thought again of her past, personal grudges and petty agendas tearing the Darken asunder, which in turn toppled them from their rightful place as the regnant killers of Runeterra. She knew how to restore them. Now she just needed to find her siblings and share with them the wisdom of the pack. A warrior's blade reflects the truth in their heart. Mine is black and broken. Riven, the exile. Built on perpetual conflict, Noxus has never had a shortage of war orphans. Her father lost to an unnamed battle, and her mother to the girl's own stubborn birth. Riven was raised on a farm run by the Empire on the rocky hillsides of Travail. Physical strength and ferocious will kept the children alive and working on the hard scrap of land. But Riven hungered for more than simply bread on the table. She watched conscriptors from regional war bands visiting the farms year after year, and in them she saw a chance at the life she dreamed of. When she finally pledged the Empire her strength, she knew Noxus would embrace her as the daughter she longed to be. Riven proved a natural soldier. Young as she was, her years of hard labor allowed her to quickly master the weight of a long sword taller than herself. Her new family was forged in the heat of battle, and Riven saw her bond to her brothers and sisters in arms as unbreakable. So exceptional was her dedication to the Empire that Borum Darkwill himself recognized her with a runic blade of dark metal, enchanted by a pale sorceress within his court. The weapon was heavier than a kite shield and nearly as broad, perfectly suited to Riven's tastes. Not long after, the war hosts set sail for Ionia as part of the long-planned Noxian invasion. As this new war dragged on, it became clear that Ionia would not kneel. Riven's unit was assigned to escort another warband making its way through the embattled province of Naafiri. The warband's leader, Emistan, had employed a Zonite alchemist, eager to test a new kind of weapon. Across countless campaigns, Riven would gladly have given her life for Noxus. But now she saw something awry in these other soldiers, something that made her deeply uncomfortable. The fragile amphorae they carried on their wagons had no purpose on any battlefield she could imagine. The two warbands met increasingly fierce resistance, as if even the land itself sought to defy them. During a heavy rainstorm with mud pouring down the hillsides. Riven and her warriors were stranded with their deadly cargo, and it was then that the Ionian fighters revealed themselves. Seeing the danger, Riven called to Emistan for support. The only answer she received was a flaming arrow fired out from the ridgeline, and Riven understood this was no longer a war to expand the borders of Noxus. It was to be a complete annihilation of the enemy, no matter the cost. The wagon was hit straight on. Instinctively, Riven drew her sword, but it was too late to protect anyone but herself. Chemical fire burst from the ruptured containers, and screams filled the night. Both Ionian and Noxian falling victim to an agonizing, gruesome death. Shielded from the scorching, poisonous mists by the magic of her blade, she bore unwilling witness to scenes of horror and betrayal that should haunt her forever. For Riven, memories of the hours that followed come only in fragments and nightmares. She bound her wounds, she mourned the dead, but most of all, she came to hate the sword that saved her life. The words carved into its surface mocked her, reminding her of all she had lost. She would find a way to break it, severing her last tie to Noxus before the dawn. But when the blade was finally shattered, still she found no peace. Stripped of the faith and conviction that had bolstered her entire life, Riven chose to exile herself, wandering Ionia's battle-scarred landscape. When she finally returned to the village where she had broken the sword, it was revealed that her self-destructive needs had cost the life of their most revered elder. And yet, Ionia embraced her with forgiveness. Noxus was not nearly so merciful. Although the Empire had long since withdrawn from the First Lands, it had not forgotten about Riven or her runic blade. After fighting fiercely against those sent to bring her to justice, she refused to let any more Ionian blood be shed on her account, and surrendered herself to the charges of desertion leveled against her. As she returns to Noxus in chains, Riven remains haunted. Though Darkwill is no more, and the Empire is rumored to have evolved, she is uncertain what will become of her, or whether she will ever be made whole again. Seams and Scars by Donna Lurie Shaw. How came you to Ionia, friend? Muramat tried to keep her voice light. She had never felt uncomfortable sharing a campfire with other travelers along the road to the markets before. This, however, marked her first time sitting across the flames from a Noxian, one with an enormous weapon sheathed across her back. How many Ionian lives has that blade claimed? She wondered. The white-haired woman glanced at her father before swallowing a mouthful of charred peppers and rice, then cast her eyes down at her plate. I was born in Noxus, she said, her accent thick but her tonality nearly flawless. I have not been back since the war, and I do not plan to return. The Noxian's father, Asaconte, smiled and placed his hand on her shoulder. This is her home now, he said with finality. Muramat had invited Asa to make camp with her before she had spotted the Noxian asleep in the back of his cart. He had introduced her as his daughter, Riven in this same tone, with his chin jutting forward in preemptive defense. Muhammad hadn't pushed back against the strange old man's declaration then, but that didn't mean his daughter was beyond scrutiny. "You have not answered my question," Muhammad pressed, the chimes of her mender's necklace clinking together as she poured herself a cup of tea. "What brought you to our shores, Riven?" Riven tightly gripped her plate, tension rippling through her shoulders. "I fought in the war," a simple statement laden with sorrow. Curious to hear regret from a Noxian. "Why did you stay?" Muhammad asked. Why would anyone stay in a place where they and their people have caused so much pain, so much destruction? Crack. The plate had broken in half in Riven's white-knuckled grip, her charred peppers and rice falling to the ground. With a gasp, she dropped the plate shards before bowing ruefully. "My deepest apologies," she mumbled as she rose. "I will pay for this plate, and then we will leave you to your evening. I didn't mean to intrude." But Muhammad wasn't listening. Instead, she cradled the broken plate in her hands and held the shards to her ear, humming softly. Slowly, she adjusted her pitch, calling to the spirit within the clay. The back of her skull tingled when she hit the right tone, as the spirit reverberated with her hum. Holding the note, Muhammad lifted her necklace and flicked its chimes until she found the one that joined her and the spirit in song. She stared at the chime in the firelight. Each one had been inscribed with a symbol that identified how to mend a resonance spirit. This symbol was for smoke, a single line with a curve that became more pronounced toward the end. Muhammad lifted the shards above the fire to bathe them in the smoke. It took only moments before they knitted back together, with only a few coal-colored seams and ridges to show that the plate had ever been broken. "I'm a mender," she said as she held the pottery out to a wide-eyed Riven. "No need to replace anything." Riven took the plate and examined it. "How does it work?" she asked, running a finger down a thick black seam. "Everything has a spirit, and every spirit wants to be whole. I ask them what they need to mend and give it to them. It leaves scars," Riven sighed. "Scars are a sign of healing. That plate will never be seamless again, but it is whole, and it is strong. I'd even say it is more beautiful like this." Riven considered the plate in silence. "I am still here," she said after a moment, "because I have caused so much pain and so much destruction. I stay to atone." Muhammad nodded somberly. Clearly Riven's scars, though invisible, ran deep. Perhaps this Noxian was different from the others. But then Muhammad's eyes fell to the hilt of Riven's massive weapon, a tool for cutting, not mending. How could she really be? Muramat woke bleary-eyed to a loud thump against the side of her caravan. Bandits. Riven had insisted on keeping watch through the night, Muramat remembered as she grabbed her heaviest kettle. But the mender was experienced in dealing with robbers and could always hold her own in a fight. When she opened her door, however, she saw that Riven would not need her help after all. One of the intruders lay crumpled at the foot of the caravan. By the fire stood Riven, surrounded by 3 hulking bandits. She held the enormous hilt, and Muramat was surprised to see only a broken blade attached to the end. Yet the weapon was still formidable. It seemed to pulse in Riven's hands as she waited for the others to advance. Muramat's stomach turned to see that blade, not relishing the sight of a Noxian spilling more Ionian blood. But still she watched. The bandits rushed at Riven, yelling incoherently. But she took a single step forward and repulsed them with a burst of energy from her blade. They dropped their weapons, then scrambled to find them in the dark. Riven could have cut them all down, Muramat realized, but she didn't. Instead, she raised her sword, which began to glow an eerie green. The magic from the weapon blasted outward and repelled one of the bandits as soon as it touched him. He fell to the ground in a catatonic daze. By this point, the others were on their feet, weapons in hand. Riven brought her arm back, and glowing pieces of metal raced toward the Noxian from the cart. The shards formed around the blade, making it look almost whole, though there were still gaps between the pieces. The bandits rushed her again. Or so they tried. Riven whipped the blade in front of her and blew them back against the caravan with a sudden gust of wind, knocking them all unconscious. A bloodless victory. Muramat stepped gingerly over the defeated bandits. "What will you do with them?" she asked Riven, who had barely broken a sweat. Riven shrugged, letting the shards of her sword drop to the ground. "I'll just tie them to a tree until morning." Muramat stared at the remnant of the blade. It didn't seem as threatening anymore, now that she had seen how Riven wielded it. "Could I see your weapon?" Riven frowned and took a step back. "Why? You don't need to hand it to me. Just hold it up." Warily, Riven raised the blade. Muramat closed her eyes and hummed. "What are you doing?" Riven asked in alarm, just as Muramat found the right pitch. A pair of eyes searching. 3 hunters, hearts filled with hate, thoughts with revenge. Burning. Everything burning. Muramat didn't realize she had fallen until she felt Riven shake her. "Are you all right?" "Someone," Muramat whispered, her throat dry, "is searching for this blade. For you." Riven blanched, but her eyes revealed nothing of her thoughts. "What did you do, Muramat?" she asked in a low whisper. "I was wrong to question you. I wanted to offer my apology." apologies by mending your sword. No, the intensity of the word took Muramat by surprise. If you truly wanted to thank me, you will never fix this blade. Riven chuckled, a bitter sound. The one thing I would want you to fix, you can't. But thank you for the offer. She sighed, exhausted, and collected up the shards of her sword. You should go back to sleep if you want to get to the marketplace early tomorrow. Muramat nodded and slowly made her way to her caravan. When she looked back, Riven was at the fire, sitting and watching the night. Not for the first time, Muramat wished she knew how to mend people. A rose cannot grow in darkness. It dies, and the darkness grows. Leblanc, the deceiver. Matron of the Black Rose, Leblanc's identity is as intangible as the whispers that describe her, as ephemeral as the illusions that give her shape. Perhaps it is unknown even to herself after so many centuries of mimicry and deception, remnants of an order that has existed far longer than Noxus itself. Initiates of the Black Rose have schemed from the shadows for centuries, drawing the rich and powerful to their ranks. Though they do not often learn the origins of their matron, many have uncovered legends of a pale sorceress who aided the broken barbarian tribes in their struggle against the infamous Iron Revenant, subjugating lands already ravaged by the Darken. Even today, his name is whispered in fear, Mordekaiser, uniquely skilled among the Revenant's inner circle before she betrayed him. The sorceress pledged to neutralize the source of his power, the immortal bastion, cutting him off from the well of death that fueled his nightmarish empire. Yet, even as the barbarians built an empire of their own in the bastion's shadow, they failed to realize that the arcane secrets it held had not completely been locked away. The pale sorceress had always been gifted at illusion, and her greatest trick was to make Noxus forget the dark power roiling in its own heart. Before she was burned from the pages of history around the time of the Rune Wars, the Black Rose exists now to further the clandestine interests of those who can wield such magic, with its rank and file composed of mundane nobles drawn to rumors of miracles, kept in thrall and ruthlessly exploited. Even the most powerful military commander could only ever serve the cult's true masters, as they fight one another for influence in games of intrigue and conquest, both in the Noxian capital and beyond its borders. For centuries, Leblanc has served in secret as an advisor to foreign dignitaries, appearing in many nations at once, her illusions driving order into chaos. Rumors of a new matron rising with each generation only raise further questions. Which is the true version of herself? When she speaks, is it with her own voice? And what will the price be for the favor she offers? Borum Darkwill was but the latest to learn this last answer for himself. Though the Black Rose had aided his bid for the throne, he refused the counsel of their hand-picked advisors, requiring Leblanc to take drastic measures, manipulating a young nobleman named Jericho Swain into revealing the cult's involvement. Leblanc allowed herself to be executed, along with the most prominent conspirators, or at least so it appeared. In time, she reached out to Darkwill herself and found an increasingly paranoid ruler, fearful of his own mortality. After promising him the secrets to extend his life, Leblanc slowly poisoned Darkwill's mind, even as she empowered him. Under his rule, the Noxian reverence of strength became something far more sinister, and together they ensured Swain's legend would end in disgrace on the battlefields of Ionia. But Swain, emboldened by forbidden lore from within the immortal bastion, did something wholly unexpected, managing to drag Darkwill from the throne and seize Noxus for himself. This new Grand General was not interested in his own legacy, but the glory of the Empire. And such a man could not so easily be corrupted. After countless centuries, Leblanc wondered, had she finally found a worthy nemesis? Her actions have pushed Runeterra to the brink of all-out war many times. In the wake of desperate campaigns across the Freljord, on Targon's peaks, and deep in Shurima's deserts, the darkest magic has begun to spread once more, circling closer and closer to Noxus. Whether Leblanc is still the same pale sorceress who betrayed the Iron Revenant, or merely one of countless hollow reflections, her influence clearly stems from ancient roots. The black rose has yet to truly bloom. Thorns of the Black Rose by L.J. Goulding. I don't understand, General Grant mutters, nervously trying to smother the light from his lamp. There's nothing here. It's a dead end. He stands at the threshold, framed by the dark stonework against the deeper darkness beyond it. He does not see the open gateway before him, nor the angular Ognon inscriptions that surround it. He does not see the fragments of bone that litter the flagstones beneath his boots. I smile, playing my part. It is the simplest of things, I tell him, to hide in plain sight. The general turns, confusion and frustration written clearly upon his face. Don't play games with me, cousin. Do you have any idea what I'm risking being down here? Or what would happen if we're caught? These districts are forbidden by order of the council. There are Legion patrols everywhere. This, at least, is true. Ever since the usurper Swain seized control, he has kept the immortal bastion locked down. Officially, it is to protect the Trifarics against reprisals from those noble houses that opposed its creation. Unofficially, he is daring men like Brannon Grant to expose themselves as his enemies. But they would not doubt your loyalty, I reassure him. A hero of the gates of mourning, no less. You are to be honored by command of the Grand General himself. What can they say to that? If we were spotted, you would not even need to run. His expression darkens. Oh, you don't run from the Trifarian Legion. I do not need to hear this thinly veiled propaganda again. In little more than a year, Swain has built a certain mystique around himself and the hand of Noxus, and those that serve them both. It is a brilliant scheme, though it fills my heart with hatred to admit it. Even so I let Granth have his moment. It is why we are here. His eyes fall to the ground. We didn't win the gates of morning. The Legion did. That's why Swain won't attend the triumph. He knows we need not even have been there, damn him. He insults us with this pomp and ceremony in front of all Noxus. I nod, laying a hand on Grant's shoulder, and that is why we will make him pay for everything he has done. You are a true Noxian. Anyone can see that. I have told the others all about you, and they wish to meet you for themselves. She wishes to meet you. I can't meet anyone, cousin, if we can't get inside. He glances around. Doesn't the black row? I recoil. Do not use that name. It makes you sound like, well, as you said, like you don't understand. Pushing past him, I stride through the yawning mouth of the gate. He almost drops the lantern in surprise, seeing the entrance now for the first time. Stumbling after me, Granth checks to make sure we are not being followed, then squints into the shadows of the passageway. Is it true? He hisses. What they say about her, is it true? I do not slow my pace. Come, find out for yourself. The immortal bastion is not a monument, as most Noxians believe. Nor is it merely a fortress, in the sense that the old tribes knew it. The stone around us almost thrums with power, though Granth is mostly oblivious. I have seen it countless times, through the centuries. He knows something is not right, but feels it only as a lethargic drag on his limbs and a whispering itch in the back of his brain. Few mortals last long when they are this close to the source. To his credit, he still has his wits about him, enough to reach for his dagger when a robed figure emerges from the gloom. I pass both of us, coming in the other direction. I look tired. No matter, this will be concluded soon enough. Granth eyes me suspiciously until I disappear from sight, then ambles to the side of the person he knows as his cousin. Hadrian, who are these people? Granth asks as more anonymous figures come and go. I don't recognize any of them. Are they the allies you spoke of among the other houses? I sigh. It is disappointing that the finest military minds often cannot see what is right in front of them. They are sympathetic to our family's plight, I reply, keeping the disdain from my voice. We, all of us, are committed to the downfall of the usurper and the restoration of the throne. It is better that you do not know their names or their faces. He scoffs. But how can we work together if we... The words die on his lips as we turn the last corner. We stand at the edge of the great well of souls, plunging down into the bedrock of Noxus, far deeper than the physical dimensions of the bastion should even allow. A roiling miasma of cold blues and jealous greens swirls in the distance beneath us, underlighting the 3 bridges that span the gap. There, between them, suspended against against the madness is a frightful, hulking silhouette that every Noxian knows only too well. A husk of lifeless armor depicted in every history book, and 1,000 defaced statues scattered across the old city. Granth takes half a step back. "It can't be," he murmurs. It can't." His voice is cracking. His eyes glisten with tears. I lean in over his shoulder to whisper behind his ear. "Do you see the truth of it now? The truth behind the great empire of Noxus. So has it been for centuries, since the days of the first kings. No grand general, no emperor or tyrant can stand unless the mistress of the immortal bastion allows it. Many are those who would serve, though few prove worthy." I gently pluck the lantern from his trembling fingers and guide him away from the sight that has so transfixed him, toward the veiled alcoves that line the passage on either side. Swain must fall. Our cabal is utterly committed to this, above all else, and we will sacrifice whatever we must to achieve it. On some level, Granth knows what he will see, even before I pull back the shroud. It is the desiccated body of his cousin, Hadrian. The younger man's features are frozen in a deathly rictus. Yet there is an unmistakable sense of peace about it. Your house was singled out most unfairly during the coup, Brannon Grant. Your father and his brothers were stripped of all they possessed, simply for remaining true to Borum Darkwill at the end. Hadrian gave his life gladly in pursuit of revenge. Will you honor that debt and join us now, too? Granth sinks to his knees, looking up at me with fresh eyes. You are her. You are the pale woman." He does not even flinch when a second pale woman appears at my side. We speak with the same voice. "I am everywhere. I am everyone. You know only what you need to know, and see what I want you to see." Jericho Swain is not the only one who can exaggerate his own legend. A third pale woman steps out behind Granth, and then a fourth. Even so, he bows his head to me, no doubt convinced he finally understands. He does not need us to point out the empty alcove beside his cousins. "With all my heart," he swears, "and every drop of my noble blood, I will serve you, my lady. I will not rest until the pretender Swain is dead. This naive fool thinks he will be the one to land the killing blow. I will let him think that, for it suits my purpose, which is merely to probe the Grand General's defenses." I trace the sigil of the Cabal in the air above Grant's head, marking him as my own. None who can see it will interfere with the plots we shall soon devise. Rise then, proud son of the Noxie. Your pledge is heard and accepted. Together we will be victorious, and your name will be celebrated as the savior of an empire.